Hi, folks. This is Louis Hertham, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO show Westworld. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons. Alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
Roger Roper and Carrie Gross are on the road, so you'll just be stuck with us tonight. This is our Instacast episode where we look back on this week's episode of Westworld and provide our immediate reactions. This week's episode is entitled Kiksuya. Big D, what'd you think?
I think this is going to be one of those polarizing episodes. And for the first time all season, I just didn't want to take notes. And I've been complaining as we've been watching that a lot of times the story you're trying to keep track of, bits and pieces of the mystery here and there. This was probably, in my book, top 3 Westworld episodes of all time. I think a lot of people are going to hate it and say, oh, it's filler, you're crazy. Absolutely loved it. I think the show has demonstrated that it can be more than just a mystery box. And for me, I couldn't have hoped for any more.
Yeah, I felt like a Jedi Knight detecting a disturbance in the Force, just a million minds at once shrieking about how butthurt they were about this episode. I expect full backlash, and I agree with you, Big D. I loved it. I feel this is the episode where Westworld grew up. Prior to this, a lot of the episodes felt like it was made for children, very simplistic, very sci-fi, in the most generic sense. And I only hope that we have this sort of emotional weight going forward on the show.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I think people are going to hate you. But it's everything we've wanted. It was cinematic. It was shot beautifully. It was an hour and 1 minute complete story. It was beautifully shot. The story was compelling. The complaints we usually get and that we've been sharing is that there's been no character development in the last 12 episodes. Essentially, Dolores in season 1 is Dolores now, with the minor tweaks here and there, but there's been no real character development besides the Man in Black. This episode was a love story, essentially. It explained a lot of the mystery, the origin of the park, but it did it in a compelling manner that was something I don't think Westworld has done in a complete 1 hour episode.
Yeah, to be clear, we covered about 40 years of development in one character. 4 decades with a change of a tribe, with the change of the park, with the change of leadership. Even the texts look different. And I feel like this sort of a micro story, this sort of a vignette is what satisfies me the most about Westworld. And we've gotten bits and pieces of them over the 2 seasons. But people ask, what could have season 1 done to make you happier? Or, how could the show be different if it's not for the mystery that it throws at you every week? And I think this is a good example of season 1 literally could have been 10 of these, piecing a small story together, building that world for us, and I would have been perfectly happy with it. Ratings probably would have sucked, but for me as a viewer, I would love that.
Yeah, and remember, the way that they structure the episode, it wasn't just a bottle episode of Akecheta and we're learning about Ghost Nation. It's told through the lens of Akecheta having a conversation with Maeve's daughter, then the pieces of Maeve in the Mesa current day with the text and with Sizemore, and it all comes around and it ties into the end. So I thought it was beautifully done. I was happy in that now I feel Shogun World, the time we spent there, was to build the relationship and validate that Maeve and Sizemore have a true friendship to the point where he even does a full 180. He turns around and says, you deserve your daughter. You should be with her. He actually cries. If you don't dedicate the time in Shogun World to build that, this would have been laugh out loud TV. But instead, I buy it.
Yeah, it verged on being unbelievable. I think it was a stretch, but really, it would have been completely unbelievable if they didn't have that time in Shogun World. I completely agree. In addition, there were some other little quirky things about the episode, like if you have an Akecheta actually walking around your lab, painted up with feathers in his hair, you might notice him moving around. I felt like security was a little lax.
Well, I have an idea on that, and I think, I don't know, do you want to switch here into like things we've learned or kind of thoughts we have?
No, just hit me with your idea.
Okay. I don't think that was an accident. And my wife and I were watching it being like, this is a little unlikely. You do have normal techs walking around in security. But let's remember what happens previous to that. Akecheta finally goes in after almost 10 years without dying, which is a big revelation. The texts say, is this possible? Is he an Alpha 2? Which means he is second generation, has not been updated. They call for, quote unquote, the boss. The woman comes in. We don't know her name or position, but the texts address her as ma'am. She's shocked to find out that Akecheta is one of the early versions and survived 10 years. They expect her to give the command to get rid of him. Instead, she says, update him, put him back, and she gives a little acknowledgement to him that I felt Ford mentioning later that he was watching Akecheta grow. They cleared a path for him to find some information.
Oh, it's a good catch. I didn't catch that at all. That makes a lot of sense. The title of the episode is Kiksuya, which is Lakota for remember, and I think it's really straightforward in this sense. There's not a lot of guessing or piecing it together. This entire episode is about remembrance, and there was a lot that we learned in those memories. And one of the things that was a big revelation for me was just the origin of the maze, actually seeing that maze imprint and where it came from. That's been a mystery for, over a year now. And now I think we finally got it figured out.
Yeah. The fact that Ford hijacked Akecheta's accidental find. Akecheta stumbles into Escalante after the first incident where the Deathbringer Maeve shoots Arnold, the creator, and there was the toy maze. He picks it up, thinks it has significance. So then when Ford later finds the maze imprint going around, the whole Dolores storyline wasn't created by him. He just kind of plagiarized what was already organically growing.
Right. And then he says, he taught it to his men, and then that spread. So we've always said, it's not like people are going around carving it into scalps. No, they actually seem to be carving it into scalps. You see that spread, and you see now that in the park, there are different things spreading. There's the Man in Black's, disease, essentially, that's spreading. You've got the reverie spreading. So it's a question of, are some of these things the same? Are they all different? Is it a kind of a perfect storm of developments?
Yeah, and I think I'll give you my take on the origin of the outbreak and the origin of consciousness. I think it's humans' fault that we can tie back now. That when the first incident happened and Arnold got Dolores to kill everybody off, Akecheta was alive prior to that. He's then killed. He goes into Escalante. He hears the reveries playing on the phonograph, which we know was used as a trigger to condition the host to behave a certain way, or that could have been the trigger to have Maeve be able to go off of narrative. There's also a fly that lands, so it could be the typical fly as well. But when he is then killed subsequently, he is the only host, it looks like, that survived the first incident. When he's brought down to the techs are fixing him, and they're complaining about how the staff hasn't completely been replaced. So they're still at half staff. And they say, what should we do with this guy? Should we decommission him? Should we put him out? They said, nah, just patch him up, get him back out there. So they sent Akecheta back out into the park, retaining his old data instead of a complete wipe. And that might be the first kernel and seed of consciousness that led to everything else.
And some of the things we see in his memories kind of put together his worldview for us. And I found it really interesting that he has names for different characters that we know by their, first names. And for instance, Dolores or Wyatt is known as the Deathbringer. Arnold is the one referred to as the creator. And Ford is the one who puts us to sleep. And he doesn't refer to Ford as the creator. So I thought it was a really interesting acknowledgement of Arnold's position in all this. And I hate to say it, but this memory seems to fuel the Arnold was an actual person argument, which seems to be more and more likely the further we get into season 2.
Yeah, the more independent confirmation or experiences that show Arnold in the real world, I'm leaning more towards that. So it's sometimes, like you said, Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually correct. And I love the way that they told the first half of the story, the love story between Akecheta and Kohana. I felt like I was watching Last of the Mohegans. You could understand his love and how a tragic event is what usually triggers hosts to reel and to wake up. And of all the events and all of the loves that have been tragically inflicted on Host, his has to be some of the worst. He lost his love and his whole tribe. It was a painful existence, and I think this could explain logically why when Ghost Nation has all of the humans that they had captured, when it was Stubbs, it was Emily, they introduce Akecheta as the original, and that meaning now must mean that he is the first woke host. He was the host that started the Maze religion and started the host questioning what world they were living in and whether it was the right one.
Another thing we see through his eyes is a kind of an in-between or an interim view of the thing that William is building, right? So we saw from William and Dolores' view a few episodes ago, we've got a name for it, whether it be the Valley Beyond or some people called it now the Grave, whatever it is that they're building. He sees it, and we get to see that it is a physical presence. It is deep. It has mechanical components to it. Did you get anything from seeing it that we haven't discussed before?
Well, what I did was actually, that was one of the times I stopped it and took a picture of it. It looks strangely to me. It is a deep facility that is definitely technology based. It resembles what I would think of like a nuclear reactor. Some of the rods, the core rods, and it is either a data center, but it is something mechanical. There is a door, and I think that Akecheta is mistakenly identifying that as a way to enter and leave. It could have a simpler use as far as the facility, but I got to believe this is our, the thought we had of the human version of the cradle, because it looks like it's a buried data center, and those are maybe cooling towers or something that has to do with a data farm.
Right, and there are several references to the door in this episode. It is seen as in the scene with Logan, which again, we get to see Logan again. Akecheta says that he calls it that they refer to it as like a passage out of the world, and this is the wrong world. Again, when he's talking to when Akecheta is talking to the man in black, he is talking about death, and he says that that's a passage from this brutal world and that you don't deserve it. So there are different views being expressed, not a completely clear picture of what the door is all about, or it can mean different things to different people.
Yeah, it was nice to see Logan again. I hope that wasn't the last time we've seen him. And it's sad to think that his ultimate demise to a drug addiction could be found, the origin seed of that, in going mad from the sun, that William might have to add another tally to his family members that he's caused the demise of, intentionally or unintentionally. But having him back in the park was great. You think there's a chance we're going to see him maybe in the end of the season or maybe next?
Oh, I think for sure. I honestly thought from that scene, I was like, oh my God, Logan started a religion. That's literally what I thought there was going on. I'm glad it didn't go that way. But I don't think it's the last we've seen of him. I think that he will play a role as the season goes on, or maybe even to season 3, who knows. What did you think of his performance in that scene? It was, first of all, dude's got some big feet.
I didn't notice his feet. I was just noticing that sunburn. I was like, oh, that shit looks painful. I passed out at a bar in the Hamptons one summer and woke up and my feet were swollen like that. It was not a pleasant thing. If you ever burn the skin on the top of your feet, but he did go mad pretty quick. Let's go back to the last time that we saw Logan. He was with William. William put him on top of the horse naked, slapped his ass, said something to the effect that you're not the man who's going to be needed to run Delos. Now Logan's horse runs off. Horse eventually dies. Logan makes his way to that tree. At that point, he wasn't really questioning the value or the reality of the world. So I don't know if a couple days in the sun that didn't kill him could get him to that point. Is there anything else you could think that would explain that quick change?
The only thing I could think of is cognitive plateau. That if this Logan is some sort of a hybrid, then that would explain the whole phrase of like, this is the wrong world. Like if that's him vocalizing his mind rejecting itself, because that was the part that confused me. Is I was like, what does that mean? This is the wrong world. The fact that you're in Westworld and you want to get out wouldn't be as simple as, I mean, the park's got to have some protocols where if you're a guest and you get lost, they can find you and get you out, right?
Right, but Akecheta refers to him. He says, "Your kind will find you." So I got to believe that Akecheta is identifying him as a human, but it is very odd that you could go from thinking the park is great, it's a lot of fun, you've been there multiple times, so now I got to find the door, I got to get out of here, this isn't right, this isn't the right world. He's having the same questions that Akecheta later on finds is real, and for somebody to go mad after that little time out in the sun seems a bit of a stretch, but hopefully there is an explanation that makes it plausible.
I think it's one of the mysteries that they do feed us in this episode. A couple of more concrete pieces are we learn that Maeve's ability to control other hosts is rooted in technology and also unique in the park, that she can do something that nobody else can do, not even Delos itself.
And we've learned that even though she's in the mesa being worked on, she's still reaching the outer ring of the park. So does that lead you to believe that she's not utilizing just the mesh network, which would need hosts to daisy chain all the way to the end of the park, that she's somehow now, tapped into a power that she can reach all the hosts simultaneously?
Well, it might be dependent on the fact that she's actually plugged into the network right now. Like they've got her actually tapped in.
Very, very, very true. Another stupid move by the humans. You have a host that's aware and can control other hosts and has admin privileges, and you just stick her into the mainframe or the main access point. Stupid.
Yeah, as an extension of that ability, though, we do see that they notice toward the end of the episode that she is communicating distantly to elsewhere in the park. We know that Akecheta, from this episode, the reason why he's been visiting the homestead is to watch over Maeve's daughter, not to slaughter her. So it's kind of he talks about being misunderstood, but. Is it possible that Maeve is now using Akecheta as a sort of a conduit as well for communication?
Yeah, and I want to say that the reason why Akecheta has been protecting Maeve's daughter this whole time, she saved him early on when he was in between that 10-year process of having the awakening, and he was adventuring through the park, through areas that had many enemies, into Sweetwater, and he's injured badly to where Maeve's daughter saves him, so he feels an obligation to protect her. So I wasn't too sure if that final conversation where Maeve is on the gurney, Akecheta's talking to her daughter, he is flipping, he's alternating between Lakota and English. And my wife took the English components of the conversation as to Maeve verbalizing through Akecheta's body, then Akecheta communicating back to Maeve. So Akecheta says something to the effect of, I couldn't protect you, I always wanted to. That is Maeve talking to her daughter. And then Akecheta responds to Maeve, something along the lines, and again, I didn't take all the notes, was, if you survive, come and find us. So it seems like it's a two-way communication and that Maeve's powers are only growing. And if she can survive what's happening to her right now, the experimenting and using her control features, she's going to be even more powerful than we saw her last time in Shogun World.
So before we close out Big D, a couple questions that we have sitting out now. With every episode, we get answers, but we also get new mysteries. The one question I had is the first time that we see Ghost Nation through Akecheta's tale, we know that he believes that there's a backstory to the tribe, right? But obviously they haven't been living on this land forever. They are in fact hosts. And so they must have been incepted at some date. It's reason to believe, again, by the fact of their capabilities and they can pass for human, that they're fairly, being an Alpha 2, they're fairly modern hosts, even though old in the current lineup. They're not, they don't predate creations from Arnold and Ford. Is it possible that their story starts right before the massacre at Escalante, like basically right before Arnold is killed? Could it be that their tribe was incepted, just maybe weeks, months, days before that?
Well, if you remember, at that point, the park is not opened because the park hasn't opened at the point of the first incident at Escalante. So maybe it's a soft open. They haven't had all the narratives flushed out, so they know that they want a native component to the stories. So they put them out there. They're living a peaceful existence. They're not bothering anyone until they're brought into more of the active role of the host once the park opens, and they make them the more violent, typical, stereotypical native that might want to kill and fight. So I think they were just leading a peaceful existence through this beta test phase, and that once the park opened, the narratives just got progressively more violent.
Yeah, I mean, what good is a being unless you can kill it, right?
Oh, that's kind of sad now that we have some feeling for these. A question that I had piggybacks off of the conduit we just discussed between Maeve and Akecheta and their conversation. Maeve ends the conversation by quoting Kohana, Akecheta's love, where she says, "Take my heart when you go." Did you read that as she somehow had prior knowledge that either she was Kohana, she accessed Kohana's memories, or there's something else going on that she maybe read the memories from Akecheta, or she was listening into the story the whole time, still trying to protect her daughter remotely?
Right. I initially thought, oh man, are they making it so that she is Kohana, that the body was put into cold storage, but that consciousness was now Maeve, and that's why that's their bond and everything. But I backed off that idea and went more to your latter concept, which is she's reading into him. They say that it's just not a data exchange, that she can also issue commands and everything else. So she can query the memory of another host. It seems to be the case, and she can read that. And again, if you look at Maeve, the full suite of potential abilities she can have, there would be a huge spot in this series for a character that has that digital empathy, right? That can basically feel what other hosts are feeling and kind of help them along their journeys or cure their consciousness, or there's a million ways that you can go about it. Again, kind of bringing in the softer side of data.
So now I think one of the other mysteries that I'd like to question is the conversation and what the meaning is between Emily and Ghost Nation. Emily pulls into camp. She says, I don't have a quarrel with you. I want my father back. And she says that her feelings and motivations are aligned with Ghost Nation, that they want the Man in Black to suffer, but she wants him to suffer even more. Do you buy this, that she actually this whole time has had not too kind or not too nice plans for her father? Or is she playing this role to get him out of camp, which somehow he's still alive after taking all those shots and bleeding and laying there for a day?
Yeah, I can't believe we've gotten this far into this Instacast without even mentioning that part. He's still alive, and there's everybody's telling stories. You got, it's very pastoral, and he's just bleeding.
He pulled his ass through the woods down to the riverbed. He then tries to pump himself up. Hey, we're not going to die here. Passes out. Akecheta kicks him, throws him over the horse, much like he did to Lawrence. And now he's laying there in the sun under the tree. Come on. If he's human, he is one tough old bastard.
I think if Emily was there to help him out, she isn't anymore. But it's hard to say. That's a weird situation. Convincing performance. I was like, man, there's a lot of hate in this woman.
Yeah, and what is the disease that Akecheta says, your father's, there's a disease in him and we can't allow him to spread it?
So if you don't want to hear anything about the next episode, fast forward about, 15, 20 seconds. But in the trailer for the next episode, the Man in Black in a voiceover refers to a stain that he has inside of him. So I think it's that same thing. There's something in him. I think it's psychological or spiritual. I don't think it's actually a physical disease
or a lack of empathy.
Well, he's got empathy for Lawrence.
Yeah, but it was also nice to see that cold storage was there 10 years after the park opened, so they were growing pretty quick. And the bodies in cold storage, they look nice and fresh.
Yeah, lots of boobs and dicks in this one, so I think they really wanted to hit their quota on this episode.
Oh, and I was so happy to hear that we got our Nirvana heart-shaped box cover that they used in one of the preseason trailers.
Yeah, we did. And again, for anybody who's not familiar with the song, Kurt Cobain said that he wrote it actually about kids with cancer, but it was later sort of revealed that, in fact, it was a song to Courtney Love. So it is a love song of his own little way. And that line, I wish I could eat your cancer when you turn black, is his way of saying I love you, which is kind of sweet.
I wonder if that disease the Man in Black has is some kind of cancer. But another thing I noticed is a callback possibly to season 1. In season 1, there's the episode The Stray, which referred to the woodcutter that went off narrative. In this episode, we hear Akecheta's original tribe refer to him and the other Ghost Nation after they've been reformatted and come back to camp as the Strays. She tells him go back and join the other Strays. So it's nice to see a tie into the first season about hosts that have changed and gone off of their original narratives.
And speaking of that, you see members of the tribe being replaced, and they call them ghosts as they come back to. So there's another connection there. But there's a very powerful quote that came from Akecheta, who said, "For everybody in this place," meaning cold storage, "there was someone who mourned its loss, even if they didn't know why." And I wonder if that's also referencing that pairing up of hosts again, that it seemed like for every one, there was another one who would notice their absence, who would feel their loss. And I think we go back to your assertion earlier this season that there seems to be always this duality, this pairing of hosts. And I wonder what the significance of that is. If maybe for every single one that's put in cold storage, there is one out there missing them, and that's intentional.
But what do you think, and let's try to close this out here, what do you think the general take on this episode will be? And let's break it down by average listeners, the voicemails we get, and then just the crazy devoted fans to the show.
I think the average viewer is going to be disappointed in this one. It's a little slower moving. None of the real favorites are in this episode. I mean, Maeve appears a bit, but it's not, it's a lesser known character. So there's that. I think that the Telegraph writer on this one, they're going to be on fire after this because there's a lot of stable ground to stand on. One of the complaints that I've had about season 2 is that there's, without firm footing, without some ground rules, without some concrete history, without, as you've mentioned, a reliable narrator, it's hard to figure anything out. And I think Akecheta is the most reliable narrator we've had.
Yeah. And I think we can finally give an answer to, is Ford the villain or the good guy in this story? And I think he has to now be pushed clearly over to the good guy side. When he comes across the bear scene and realizes what's been going on, he's happy that he sees some growth and feels bad that he's forced them to grow in the dark and actually assists them in it. And at this point early on, he even knows the day is going to come that he's going to meet the Deathbringer. So playing that whole Dolores, giving her consciousness, was all just a ploy. And playing the vengeful Ford who didn't care about the host was all an act. I think this has to firmly put him in the good guy category.
I'm not sold yet, but again, you come upon a night scene where a guy's sitting there scalping a bunch of hosts. I don't know if it's exactly, blood on his hands and everything. There is a symbolism there. So I'm not quite ready yet, but it does seem to be trending in that direction. I do, though, think that if you want to talk about a benevolent entity or a creator, I think that's much more a role fulfilled by Arnold.
So what do you think Roger's going to think of this episode?
Oh, I think he'll like it.
You do?
Yeah, I think he'll dig it.
You don't think he'll say it was fan service?
No, because this is what Raj does. He'll go, if it's got some big sweeping philosophy, he'll like to preach that philosophy, whether he believes in it or not. It's like when he put up posters in his college dorm room just because other people like the movie.
Yeah, speaking of movies, we recorded Big Trouble in Little China a couple hours ago.
Yeah, so for Shat the Movies, if you haven't listened to our movies podcast, that is it's where everything started. And Big Trouble in Little China was recorded just today, and we had a special guest on, and can't wait to get that one out. It was a lot of fun. Again, we really, we do the 3 episodes a week for Shat on TV with the Instacast, and then the deep dive coming on Tuesday, and then on Friday having the Telegraph. And it's a lot of work, and we got to stay factual, and we don't want to make mistakes, and we don't really kick back. But Shat the Movies, if you want to hear us, put our hair down,
get loose.
That's the way. Get loose. That's where you go.
Yeah, if you want to hear Gene discuss the best place to hide mushrooms when you go to a club, you listen to Shat the Movies.
All right, that seems like a good point to stop and start doing our research for Tuesday's deep dive. This concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV, Westworld. Be sure to join us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. At Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. If you've got ideas about the Instacast and want to get them in before the deep dive, email us at hosts@shatontv.com as soon as possible. Also, if you email us at hosts@shatontv.com, you can get in for The Telegraph, which comes on Friday, wherever where fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. We have a special musical sign out from our good friend Simon, who's done some guitar work before that we featured on the podcast. Really, really talented. So if you'd like to hear that, stick around for the end of the podcast. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, Roger Roper, and Carrie Gross, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Tuesday for the Westworld Deep Dive for episode 8, Kiksuya.